Hello all, very good morning. Thanks for joining the session. Let me share my screen. Hope you are all now able to see my screen, I believe. Let's go and let's start from there. So before going, we have seen the types of the applications. Okay, so we have seen the types of the applications, Model 1 and Model 2 architectures. I think we have not seen this Model 1, Model 2 architectures and all. So let's not worry about this one. Probably these things will be covered as part of the Spring WebMVC courses discussion, maybe if I conduct in future, maybe free or something else. So let's not worry on these patterns. So let's move on to Spring history. I'll come back. So Spring history, I'll come back, and these are I'm striking out. Just I'm striking out. So let's go and then write the today's agenda. Saurabh, can you turn off your video? Unfortunately, maybe accidentally opened. I'm disallowing you to unmute yourself. I just have ticked off that right mark. So you are not able to unmute yourself. If you have any questions, just ping me. Class notes I already have sent, right? Okay. If maybe today few people might were joined, right? So if any of the people you were joined, this is the classroom link for you. Just in a moment, let me ping the classroom link, and then let me start the today's agenda. One moment. Yes, this is the classroom link. You guys can join here. Yeah, if anyone came today, just join here. Perfect. And let's go and then continue the Spring Core content. So date is 15 June 2023, and then agenda. So agenda is, first we'll discuss about the CoreJava, and we'll discuss about the bean. Then we'll discuss about the CoreJava versus bean. Then we'll go to the coupling, and we'll go to the tight coupling with an example code, and we'll apply the solution to this tight coupling as a so we will loose couple the code with the inversion of controller, principle. So as part of the inversion of controller principle, we will discuss the factory and abstract factory and abstract factory design patterns. So this is what the agenda for today. Okay, clear, right? Agenda is clear. So let us try to achieve this agenda today. First, POJO. What is POJO and all? If you can go to here, Spring framework is said to be simple and non-invasive. So Spring framework is said to be simple and non-invasive. Invasive meaning burden. Non-invasive meaning non-burden. What does it mean? It means Spring framework does not force a programmer to extend or implement the framework specific classes or interfaces. I repeat this sentence, very important. Spring Framework is said to be non-invasive. Invasive meaning burden. Non-invasive meaning non-burden. Meaning Spring Framework won't burden the programmer to extend or implement the Spring Framework specific classes or interfaces. For example, if you can see this screenshot, there is a class called Hello Action, which is taken from which has been implemented in Struts, Apache Struts framework. If you can take this public class Hello Action, which is extending the action. This action is nothing but org.apache.struts.action.action. That means what? If you would like to write your own class in Struts framework, you must have to extend the Struts framework related classes or interfaces. That means it is burdening your class with the Struts related classes or interfaces. This is an example for the invasive. Whereas if you can take the non-invasive case in Spring, Spring does not force us to extend or implement any of the framework specific classes or interfaces. Right? Now you got the meaning of invasive and then non-invasive. Oh, is my voice is not clear, guys? Can anyone please confirm? Am I audible? Am I audible? Yes, it is clear actually. Not clear for few members and clear for few members. So for whom it is not clear, just check your mic and all, because most of the members said it is clear. Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks. Fine. Yeah. Fine. So, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So here, in case of the Struts framework, we are extending the framework specific class. But in case of the Spring framework, if we can take, we no need to do such a kind of extensions or implementations of the Spring framework specific classes or interfaces. That's how the Spring framework is said to be the non-invasive. Okay, hope all of you got the meaning of it. My voice is clear, I believe. See, 100% I have. Increase your system volume. Okay. Now, Spring is said to be lightweight framework because of CoreJava model, plain old Java object model. What we said, Spring is simple and non-invasive. This is what we have seen here. Spring framework is said to be a non-invasive, and we have seen somewhere Spring is simple and lightweight framework. I think that word I need to add. Spring is simple. Spring framework is said to be a simple and non-invasive. This statement I need to add. Okay. So non-invasive meaning you might have understood what is the meaning of the non-invasive. For example, you guys now tell me, just ping me if you observed this one. For example, if I have written a class like this, assume I have written a class, public class employee extends Java X dot Servlet dot let's say Servlet dot generic Servlet. Okay, maybe I have taken the public void int, something like this. Now the question for you, is it invasive or non-invasive? Right? This is invasive. Exactly true. Excellent. Great. Now let's go here. That's true. So Spring is non-invasive, meaning it doesn't force us to implement or extend any framework specific classes or interfaces. And next, Spring is said to be a simple. Why Spring is said to be simple? Because Spring uses the lightweight framework, meaning Spring becomes the lightweight framework and simple because of the plain old Java object model, POJO model. So Spring framework made J2EE application development little easier. Java enterprise application, we discussed yesterday and day before yesterday. Enterprise applications meaning the applications that were developed for an enterprise, not for an individual user, right? When it is for an enterprise, there may be enterprise services we need to add or develop in the application. So such an enterprise applications, if you want to implement using the Java, that implementation, Spring becomes little, means Spring made it little easier because of this POJO or POJI model. Okay, what is POJO class now? POJO stands for plain old Java object. So POJO stands for plain old Java object. POJOs are used for increasing the readability and reusability of a program. So first, let us see. POJO stands for plain old Java object, right? What is that plain old Java object meaning? So if you can see here, first of all, the POJO term was introduced by Martin Flower, actually. This is Martin Flower, an American software developer in 2000. So this guy, Martin Flower, let me just search for this guy. Just give me a moment. Just give me a moment. So this guy, and he is, this is Martin Fowler, and this guy is the major person behind the microservices architecture implementation. One moment, if you can see the microservices architecture, Wikipedia, if you can see, there it might have mentioned about this guy. Yes. See this? Martin Flower. This is the guy, same guy, who describes the microservices based architecture. Nowadays, very hot cake in the market. Correct? So this is the person who coined the term called POJO, plain old Java object, in the year 2000. And it is available in Java. He made this kind of design available in Java from the EJB, Enterprise Java Beans version 3.0 onwards. Okay. Now, what are the properties of the POJO basically? When something is said to be POJO. So first, something is said to be POJO if the class must be public. So let me just go here and take one simple project, some simple project, CoreJava project. Let's say simple demos, or maybe we can say simple project. Okay, just let me take this. It is not taking hyphen. Java project is not taking hyphen as an identifier. That's okay. Just let me click on finish. Perfect. Now it's building, let it build. 64% completed. Okay, fine. Now see, the POJO class must be a public. And it must have a public default constructor. And it may have the arguments constructor as well. All the objects must have some public getters and then setters to access the object values by other Java programmers. So that means if we create an object for this class, those fields of the class must be accessed using the public and then setters and then getters. So what it is saying, number one, whenever we are implementing anything, for example, employee class, first is saying it should be a public. Second is saying what? It should contains the default constructor. Okay, now first is satisfied, public. Second is saying what? It should contains the default constructor. Okay, if we don't add, then obviously we don't need to worry. The default constructor will be added, right? So, however, we were added, and then it must have the default constructor. It may have the arguments constructor as well. Optionally, it may also have the parameterized constructor if we have any parameters to be passed during the object creation. Then it should have all the objects must have some public getters and then setters. Okay, so let us take some private int employee ID and then private string employee name, and these should have a setters and then getters. Let me right click on it, go to source, generate setters and then getters. Done. And all the setters and getters should be with the public visibility. Yes, done. This is what it is saying. The object in the POJO class can have any access modifier such as private, public, protected. But all the instance variables should be private for improved security of the project. See, we have taken here, these are all the private. The fields are private, right? The variables, the instance variables we have used here are the private. Correct? Now, this is a complete POJO design, plain old Java object design. This is said to be now plain old Java object, POJO. What a POJO doesn't contain is a POJO class should not extend predefined classes. Yes, we were not extended any predefined classes. It should not implement any predefined interfaces. Yes, we were not implemented any predefined interfaces. Correct. Next, it should not have any pre-specified annotation. No, we were not using any annotations, any pre-specified annotations here. Right? So this is what the POJO. Right? So this is what the POJO we have implemented. I believe everybody, the concept of POJO is clear. Correct? What is that? An object is said to be, a class is said to be a POJO, plain old Java object. First, it should be a public class. It should contain a default constructor mandatorily. It should contain optional parameterized constructor, and all the fields must be private, and all the fields must have the public setters and then getters. So what a POJO should not contain? The POJO should not extend any predefined class, should not implement any predefined interface, and should not be added with any annotations. This is clear. Now let's go and then see the Java bean. Yeah. So, hey, after implementing this, someone asked me a question, what is POJO? So POJO meaning, see this, if a class has been designed like this, right? So this is said to be POJO. Usually why we use this, right? We use this to create an object and then put some data in the object. And then that data we will get whenever we require it. Correct. Instantiating the object with a state always. Object contains the state nothing but the data. Correct? Right. So hope it is clear for all. Yeah. Now let's see the Java bean. What is Java bean is? So Java bean is also an object class that encapsulates several objects into a file. Bean class file, that means Java class file. There are some difference between POJO and bean, but first we will see the Java bean properties. See this. all Java beans are POJOs, but not all POJOs are Java beans. Okay, clear. All Java beans are POJOs. That means, so first we need to implement. For example, if something we want to implement as a Java bean, let's say I want to implement this as a student bean. Student bean. First, it should be a plain old Java object. Yes, it's a plain old Java object. To make it as a plain old Java object, it contains what? A default constructor. And then it should contains what? It should contains what? Private fields. So let me take private string name, right? And it should contains what? Setters and then getters, public setters and then getters. So go to generate setters and then getters. So this is what now? This is a POJO. This is a POJO now. So if we want to have a bean, first that bean must be a POJO. Point number one. So all beans are POJOs, but not all POJOs are beans. How? We will understand it now. So this is a bean. First bean should be a POJO. Second, bean should implement serializable interface. So it should implement the serializable interface. Okay. Now, when we implemented with the serializable interface, let's take the generated serial version ID, right? So this is not the property of the POJO. POJO should not implement the predefined interfaces. POJO should not extend the predefined classes, but a bean must implement the serializable interface. So this is the difference. Now, a bean is a POJO which will implement the serializable interface. Right? You got the difference now. POJO is just plain old Java object. It doesn't implement anything of the predefined classes interfaces. But when it comes to bean is also a POJO, but which implements the serializable interface. This is the reason all beans are POJOs, but not all POJOs are beans. This is not a bean, but a bean can be a POJO. Right? Hope this is clear. Fields should be private, of course. This we got from the plain old Java object implementation. Fields should have getters and setters or both. Yes. A no argument constructor should be there in a bean. Of course, it is also saying by the POJO. And fields are accessed only by constructor or setter or getter. Yes, this is also saying. Now the difference between the POJO and then Java bean is POJO, it doesn't have special restrictions other than those forced by the Java language. But when it says a bean have some restrictions. So restrictions meaning, first of all, it should implement the serializable interface. When it implements the serializable interface, we have a serial version ID. That means on any of the JVM, the data that we are setting to this bean can be transported to. For example, from my JVM machine, I can transport the data to your JVM machine. When we are transporting the data should be securely transported, and at the same time, whatever the format of the data that I am transporting, you should be able to get the data. You should be able to deserialize it. So that is what some constraint, some condition. To achieve that, we are implementing the serializable interface. So meaning the POJOs are having certain restrictions. Sorry, beans are having certain restrictions. So POJO doesn't provide much control on members, but bean provide complete control on members. Control in the sense what? Setting the data, getting the data, or if you want to do any customizations, we can do. Right? So POJO can't implement the serializable interface, and then bean should implement the serializable interface. Fields can be accessed by their names. POJO fields can be accessed by their names, and bean names can be accessed with the getters and the setters. One point here we need to note, guys, when we say the POJO, POJO is also asking us to have the setters and getters, right? So if we don't have this, also it is said to be a POJO. There are no much restrictions. It is just a definition, plain old Java object. It should be very plain, with some public class, with some default constructor, with some private members and all. Or we may also have a public members also here sometimes. So that's what here it is saying. The POJO fields can be accessed by their names as well. But the fields are accessed only by the getters and then setters. So there is a restriction added here. Now fields can have any visibility. Fields can have only the private visibility. This is very, very important. POJO can have any visibility. Definition wise, it is saying private fields should be there, but POJO can have any visibility. We can have public as well. So let's say, let me take a main method. Let me take some main method here. Sorry, my bad. Let me take a main method. Now let me create an object for this employee. Now, if we have the public and if we have the public visibility, then I think not here. Let me take one another package. Let me go for one another package. Let me go for one package called test. And this is not the way of package creating. I'm not following any, rules and all, just I'm creating. So for testing, naming conventions I have not followed, but that's okay. So main method. So here, let me create employee emp is equal to new employee. Now, employee dot, see this, with the name we can access it. Employee dot emp name. That means this employee have the employee POJO fields have any visibility and they can be accessed using the name of the object itself. But if we take the student, bean, I mean to say bean, if we take, so the bean fields we can't access using the name. See, bean dot roll number. No, I'm not able to access. If I want to access, I have to use either setter, either getter. Right? So this is what it is talking about. Fields have only private visibility, but POJO fields have any visibility. So there may or may not be a no arg constructor. It is again, POJO is just plain old, which is not suggesting us to have a restrictions. It is given certain properties. So if you go with this is POJO. If you don't go with this, that's okay. Don't raise, or it is not forcing us. But in the case of bean, if you want to be acted as a bean, we should have a nor constructor. But the major difference is what? As simple, every bean is a POJO. The major difference is this one. The bean can implement the predefined interfaces or classes, whereas a POJO can't implement or extend the predefined classes or interfaces. Hope all of you got it right. I believe no confusions, right? Okay. So, okay. Is it clear, guys? Before going to this further terms, POJO and then bean differences are clear? Any questions or concerns here? Just ping your messages if it is clear or not. Yeah, great. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. So it is clear. Now let us go to the next. POJO classes and beans both are used to define Java objects. See this? This is what we have. So even though POJO, we can create a Java object. Even for a bean, we can create a Java object. So both are used for creating the Java objects, isn't it? So to increase their readability and the reusability. POJOs don't have other restrictions, while beans are special POJOs with some restrictions. We know, for example, implement serializable interface. For example, must have the no-args constructor. For example, must have the fields should be private scope and must have the getters and then setters, public getters and then setters. So these are the restrictions basically we have on the bean. But the only major difference we can see, bean is implementing or extending the API specific classes or interfaces, whereas the POJO is not extending or implementing any predefined classes or interfaces. Okay, now good. So next, Spring becomes popular because of the following three reasons: simplicity, testability, and then loose coupling. So if you can see the simplicity, Spring framework is simple because it is non-invasive and POJO and POJI model. POJI in the sense plain old Java interface. Forget about this POJI, don't confuse. So at least Spring is said to be POJO and then non-invasive. Spring uses the POJO model and Spring is said to be non-invasive. That's the reason Spring is said to be simple. Okay, now testability. So for executing the Spring application, server is non-mandatory. So basically, if you want to run any applications, application server is required. But in case of the Spring, we no need to have any server. Even we can run the application without the server as well. But in the case of the frameworks like Struts, EJB, JSP, or any other frameworks, we required an application server like JBoss or Tomcat 8, JBoss, or maybe WebLogic, or maybe WebSphere. So this kind of application servers are required to deploy the application in the servers to make them up and run. But in the case of the Spring, we no need to have any server, meaning if you want to do a simple testing, I mean to say, if you want to do a simple testing, we can even test without having a complex infrastructure like servers. That's the reason testing the Spring application or Spring components or Spring classes is very easy, meaning the classes we implemented or we written inside the Spring framework or using the Spring framework, we can easily test them. Okay, so if you want to test the application, it may need a lot of changes in the case of the Struts and the EJB application I'm saying. In the case of the EJB application, if you do a small change, to deploy that small change, it will take hardly around 5 to 10 minutes. Minimum 3 to 8 minutes it will take to deploy the changes. 10 minutes is minimum actually. For a simple change, for example, I have added some semicolon, or I have added some double semicolon. Assume what I mean to say is I just have added here some double semicolon like this. So if I remove this and then if I want to deploy this application in the application servers, first I need to build it. I'll get a var file. This var file I need to go to application server. I need to take this var file to application server, stop it. Stop will take 2 to 3 minutes and deploy this var file. Start it. Start will take again 2 to 3 minutes. For a simple change, to just deploy that simple change, if it will take 10 to 15 minutes of time, see how the developer's productivity will be killed. With that intention, Spring become, not to use the application server for testing kind of a changes. So we can just use a main method and then we can test the Spring applications. This is the basis. This is the basis for the design of the Spring Boot framework, where the Spring Boot framework will be start from the main method only. Okay, going forward, you will understand what I mean is, but right now maybe Yeah, that's what Spring MVC apps need a server, I guess. Yes, Spring MVC apps need a server. That's true. That's true. But what I mean to say is, even though we have used the Spring MVC, for example, here I have used the Spring MVC. Just let's say this is the Spring MVC. Okay, this is the Spring MVC. I have used Spring MVC. So though we have used the Spring MVC, we can still test this. I'm talking about testing. We can still test this with a simple main method. However, web application meaning web server or application server is mandatory. But what I mean to say is whatever the changes we do, for example, this is the brand service. Let's say brand controller. So I have done some changes in the brand controller. To test this brand controller, I no need to even run the server. I can test this from a simple main method where the Spring is providing the web client or kind of REST template or kind of objects. I can use them and then test it. No need of server. Meaning, I mean to say, my bad here, one small mistake I told. In order to test the controllers, we require the server for sure. But my meaning is not these controllers. My meaning is these services. There is services. I mean to say, just give me a moment. For example, some business classes. Let's say this is a simple service. So to test it, no server is required. We can test from a main method. Yesterday you understood, right? Don't confuse, please, guys. I probably making you to confuse. Yesterday we discussed an application is divided into parts: web layer, service layer, DAO layer, etc. What I mean to say is these layers, in order to test, we require the server. But this layer components, in order to test in Spring, we no need the server. But in case of the other frameworks like Struts and then EJB or JSF, to test this service layer even, we require the server. But in case of the Spring, to test this service layer components, server is not required. We just can test it using a main method. That is what my intention, right? Hope it is clear. Perfect. Now let's go and then see. So Spring can be used to develop any kind of Java applications, meaning we can develop a console application, meaning main method run applications. We can develop the web applications. We can develop the enterprise applications and all. Okay, so Spring is simple because of the POJO or POJI model, and Spring is easily test. We can test the Spring easily without using the server, and Spring components are said to be loose coupled. So Spring objects are loosely coupled. This is the core concept of the Spring framework. Now from this onwards, our Spring core concept is starting. Please focus. Our discussion, our learning, all is about to achieve the loose coupling. So now we are entering into the Spring core part, Spring core framework, or the Spring core concept part. Spring becomes popular because of the three reasons. One is simplicity, testability, and loose coupling. We understood simplicity. POJO model it is using. It is a plain old Java object and it is non-invasive. We understood. And testability is simple because the Spring components or Spring classes we can test using a simple main method. That is even clear. Then Spring components Spring is said to be loose coupled. How the Spring is said to be loose coupled? What is making it to loose coupled? This is where we need to deep dive into and then need to understand more about it. Let's now start. Okay. In order to understand the concept of loose coupling, first we need to understand the tight coupling between the Java objects. So let us implement a simple code and then try to make it see this. First, what is coupling actually, right? So let me just write something here. So what is coupling in object-oriented? Okay, in object-oriented programming, one object need to use another object to satisfy its business needs. Its business needs. This communication is said to be, or this is said to be coupling. This is said to be coupling. Right? In object-oriented programming, one object need to use another object. For example, if we can take this employee or student, so we have created student, right? So let's take the student. So student, and there is a okay, let us take employee bean. Okay, we have taken the employee pose, right? So let's make it as employee bean otherwise. So just let me refactor it simple. Employee bean. If it is said to be a bean, it must be, first let me do Control Z. Okay, fine. Fine. So let me first make it as a bean, right? So it is now bean. Let me now use the generated value. Okay. Why we need to use generated value? Can we take here generated value or already default value? Default serial version ID we have to take, or generated we have to take? Which one is suggested? Generated is the suggested one. If you take the default one and when you run this on another JVM, maybe you will get another default serial version ID, which causes your serialized data to be not serialized on that machine. Just check about the serialization concept. Okay, however, now let us generate the setters and then getters. So select all, don't select the getters and then setters for the serial version ID. Perfect. Now this is what the employee be. Now employee required to have his salary slips, correct? So let us take the class called payslip. Payslip B. When I say the B, compulsory, it implements serializable interface. When we implement the serializable interface, to make sure that it will run on any JVM machine, we should have to generate this serial version ID, not use the default one. You have to generate it. Then again, private, let's say string, this payslip for which month, and private string, this payslip contains what? Let's say salary, not string. Let's say double salary. Okay, for which month and what salary? Simple payslip. Source, generate, setters, and then getters. Now, when the payroll team, when the finance team is preparing, they'll prepare what? This payslip for which employee? Or employee contains, each and every employee contains what payslip? Okay, so two cases we can see here, but let me go in this direction. So employee required a payslip. So let me go in that direction. So what I will do here, I will take the payslip. Now employee required the payslip. Correct? Employee required the payslip. And payslip also have the employee. So however, let me first generate the setters and then getters for this one. You are getting my point, as it seems to be right. So every employee required to get the payslip. And in the similar fashion, payslip also contains what? The employee details, isn't it? Or else what we can do is just employee name and all. Let's ignore this payslip from here. Just go to the payslip class and use the employee class. Use the employee EMP. So this payslip for which EMP? For what employee the payroll team is generating the payslip? Correct. So employee, for which employee the payroll is generating the payslip. Okay, clear, right? Now, first, let's go here and then test it. I'm just trying to illustrating the meaning of coupling. So for testing, so let me take a main method. Here, first employee should be there to create the payslip, isn't it? So new employee, then emp dot set employee ID is 100 and emp dot set employee name is John. So he is the employee. For this employee, we require to generate a payslip. So payslip is equal to new payslip bean, and the payslip for the month of what? Payslip dot set employee. This is for this employee, and this payslip is for the month of June. Set month, not June, May. This is for the May 2023, and then payslip dot set salary. Let's say salary is 10,000. Oh, this is double, right? So 10,000 dollars or whatever it is I meant to say. Okay, so now what did you understand? In order to generate a payslip, finance team required the employee details for which employee they have to generate the payslip. So payslip bean required to talk to this employee bean, or payslip is required to set up with this employee bean. So payslip bean is depending on the employee bean to release the payslip for that employee. Clear? So this is called what? Coupling. Meaning payslip is depending on the employee bean to release this payslip for the employee. So payslip requires the employee object. Without employee object, there is no meaning for preparing the payslip. To whom we are giving that payslip if there will be no employee. So this is called what? Coupling. Okay, got it, right? Right. So now there is another word called coercion. So let's go and then check this word coercion. Very, very important. And nowadays, when the microservice architecture you are using, right? So coercion. Sorry, coercion in Java. This word is very, very frequently you can use coercion wiki. Let's see this coercion. So coercion is always talks about the degree of the dependency. It will talks about always degree of the dependency. I think it's not given here. See, coercion in a computer science meaning measure how well the lines of the source code within a modular work together. In simple, cohesion meaning it is a degree of the dependency. That means payslip is depending on the employee bean. Okay, and if in case employee require the payslip, right? So employee require the payslip, source, generate, getters, and then setters. Now payslip requires the employee, and employee required to get the payslip. Now if you can see the dependency, the degree of the dependency is little high. That means there is an employee and there is a payslip. Right. Now this payslip requires this employee requires this payslip. Right. So both are what? Payslip and then employee. Both are what? Interdependent. So when they are interdependent, here we can say that dependency degree is very high. That means employee requires a payslip. Payslip requires an employee. So the degree of the dependency is very high, meaning they can't without the other. So that is what the degree of the dependency. But now what we have defined. So now if you can see, we just run this, we can get the data, right? Payslip and then employee bean. So we can create an employee bean without the payslip now. We can create a payslip bean without the employee now. But payslip is using the employee, and then employee also can use the payslip. That's it. So now here, the coupling is there. That means employee is payslip is required the employee is required the payslip. Coupling is there, but that coupling is not, maybe kind of, the degree is very low. What I mean to say is degree meaning here. So if I take like this, I don't want to use set payslip. So rather what I will do is I will use this one, payslip B. Payslip B. So here what I will use is this dot payslip let me take this payslip. So this dot payslip is equal to payslip. Now see this. Now the degree is little more. The degree of dependency is now increased. If we want the employee bean, we must have the payslip bean. Correct? So we must have to first instantiate the payslip bean, and then that payslip bean we have to pass here. So degree is little increased here. Correct? The degree of the dependency is little increased. So meaning it is over coefficient. Over coefficient. For example, let's go to this payslip. And payslip required the employee. Let's take the payslip bean, and if I pass the employee bean EMP, now this dot EMP is equal to EMP. Now see this. Now see, payslip requires the employee requires the payslip. We can't create the payslip object without passing the employee. This is high degree of the dependency. Correct? This is totally high degree, high cohesion. Correct? So now what is the conclusion? Cohesion meaning the degree of the dependency. When there is a high degree of the dependency, there will be a chance of having high tight coupling. When there will be a low degree of the dependency, then there will be have a high loosely coupling. When let me type it, because these are all very important. So when there is a high cohesion, there is a high when there is a high cohesion, then there is a low loose coupling, meaning heavy tight coupling. So we will see the tight coupling concept tomorrow. When we say cohesion is low, when we say low cohesion, that means high coupling. Low cohesion meaning high loosely coupling, high loose coupling. That means low tight coupling. Correct? So this cohesion is talking about the tight coupling, high tight coupling or low tight coupling. But cohesion is talking about what? Degree of coupling. Degree of coupling is nothing but cohesion. So this is the word you can see even in the interviews. Maybe interviews are also asking this word now. What is meaning by cohesion? What is the relation to the cohesion and then the tight coupling? So the degree of the dependency or degree of the tight coupling is said to be a cohesion. When there is a high cohesion, there is a high tight coupling, low loose coupling. when there is a low cohesion, low tight coupling, high loose coupling. So tomorrow we will see loose coupling versus tight coupling. I believe all of you got this understanding. That's all from my side, guys. Any more questions for me? What is that? Sir, by seeing code, how we can we interpret degrees high or low? Based on the dependencies. Just now I have shown you, right? Yeah. Yeah. Hi, sir. Please add me Google Classroom. Google Classroom link I already have given, right? And Vidya, I have missed 2 to 3 classes. Vidhan Kashyap. Yeah. So recordings will be available to you. I will talk to the team and then make sure all the recordings will be reached by end of the day to you. Okay. How we can measure this degree of dependency? So when it is said to be low and high, I just have shown how we have done the coding. Basically, the degree of dependency is based on the coding only. If highly tight coupling coding, we will write, obviously high cohesion is there. With the coding only, we can decide whether it is high tightly coupled or low tightly coupled. Okay, right. That is what. Yeah, recordings will be sent to you by the today evening or by most tomorrow morning. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Can you please share Google Classroom link? So I'll share the Google Classroom link now. First of all, thank you so much for showing your interest towards to this free Spring course session, and you are making it as wonderful. So let us continue. And tomorrow, very important session for us, that is the factory design pattern. So we will refactor this high degree of dependencies to the loosely coupled manner. So we will reduce the cohesion slowly going forward from tomorrow onwards by applying the factory patterns. So stay tuned and then please attend the live sessions. It will be very interesting going forward. Great. So I'm just now sending you all the Google Classroom link. Once again, if anyone missed joining, please join in this Google Classroom. Thank you so much. Thanks, Pratyusha. And Sumit, recordings will be available. That's what I'm saying, right? Recordings will be available to you by the end of this today, mostly. Yeah. Yes, thanks, Sairam. Notes I will update. Yes, we have updated notes, right? So that I'll update. Okay, thank you so much, guys. And thanks for your interest and then making this as wonderful session. Thanks a lot. Let us keep going forward. Thank you, and then see you tomorrow.